This is, looks like there's been some sober home schemes luring Native Americans to rehab in Arizona just to either do nothing to help them or to kill them and bill the government for insurance.
We're back now with our NBC News investigation into a scheme at so-called sober homes targeting Arizona's vulnerable tribal members battling substance abuse. As Liz Kreutz reports, instead of getting help, officials say many wound up dead or missing.
On the Navajo Reservation in northeast Arizona,
this here is the Navajo Nation missing persons list.
Sergeant Roland Dash says his people are being preyed upon.
These are vulnerable people.
Dash says he's identified more than 120 people who have gone missing. Their families say one day loved ones were here, the next driven away in unmarked cars or white vans like these. According to state,
More than likely, they have been killed, and the people are still collecting insurance or some type of payment in some way.
officials, tribal members battling substance abuse have been the target of a nearly $1 billion Medicaid scam.
He never did came back.
A woman named Jenny, who told us her son, who struggles with alcohol addiction, is one of them.
I don't know where he is. There's times I can't sleep. There's times I can't eat.
Officials say Native Americans from several states, including Arizona, South Dakota, Montana, and Alaska, have been lured from their reservations and then taken to sobriety homes hundreds of miles away in Phoenix and other major Arizona cities with the assurance of addiction treatment. But an NBC News investigation found that in many cases, the patients never receive that treatment.
We don't have many options.
Raquel Moody, a recovering alcoholic, says over the course of 6 months, she was shuffled between 10 homes. She says she was moved every time she questioned the quality of care.
And all the clients, they all started drinking.
So open alcohol.
Yeah, I found these in the trash can.
Officials and sources pointed us to one community with multiple sober homes where we were shown these photos of patients passed out around the neighborhood. We also found patients aimlessly wandering the streets, like this Apache man who told us he had just left a sober home in Mesa, Arizona, 100 miles from where he was picked up.
I want to go home.
All this while state officials.
Yeah, that's sad that these people are tricked into going to a place for help only to not get it or end up disappearing. This is why there needs to be a lot more help for some of the most vulnerable people, because they're the easiest to prey upon, and because they're usually poor people, it's easier to get away with it because, for the most part, society doesn't care what happens to poor people. If you're not some rich sociopath, you're not given anything.
Officials allege the providers of these homes made millions off fraudulent Medicaid claims, billing for services not given, as well as for people who were in prison or had even died. So far, Arizona's Attorney General has issued 60 indictments, including 10 just this week, and seized $95 million from fraudulent providers, including luxury cars, mansions, and stacks of cash.
Certainly will be.
They should be naming the owners of these providers and the staff members involved in all this.
One of the worst frauds in the history of Arizona and one of the biggest scandals we've ever seen.
Law enforcement sources tell NBC News there is clear evidence the scheme is part of structured organized crime, operated in part by people from several Central African countries. They say the scammers took advantage of the state's Medicaid plan for Native Americans, which allows providers to bill the state directly for claims without third-party review. Where is...
Okay, how can people in Africa create a program in the United States and do this, and no one in the US government actually validates these people or does a background check or anything?
The oversight?
The oversight sits with us.
Carmen Heredia currently oversees Access, the state agency responsible for approving Medicaid claims for Native Americans. She was appointed after the fraud began.
People from indigenous nations from here in Arizona to Montana have told us the state's not doing enough, that this is still happening, that people are still missing, and worse, in some cases, their relatives have died. What can you tell these families?
It's so heartbreaking. I think that something I'm very sorry for is that they were coming forward 2 years ago saying something is fishy, something is happening, and they weren't listened to.
Heredia says the
Yeah, no surprise they weren't listened to. They're Native Americans, and our government cares very little about what happens to Native Americans.
agency is staffing up and cracking down. They've already suspended more than 300 potentially fraudulent providers. But Raquel says the damage has already been done.
Every day it's somebody new that's missing from the res. And they were all brought out here for rehab. And now they're all on the streets.
With perpetrators gaming the system, taxpayers footing the bill, and Native Americans paying the price. And we've learned the FBI